Hi everyone, I'm Rohan Raj. I am a risk management and security operations consultant, currently based out in Manila, Philippines. I work across Southeast Asian countries like Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and India. In my experience of 7 years across multiple clients and in multiple locations, I have seen a common pattern which leads to a lot of investment loss, a higher risk posture of the company, and also a lot of gap in decision making when it comes to implementing a risk management framework or implementing a compliance requirement. So today's session, I will take example of SEBI's cybersecurity and cyber resilience framework, which was introduced in 2024, and the due date of implementation is also, I think, over. It was 2025. While we talk about the process components like risk management, security operations, IT asset management, we'll also talk about the common pitfall currently in the industry. We'll also talk about how do we map from a strategy to system reality. Because the biggest gap that we see is that the vision is very clear when it is defined at a board level, but when it hits the ground, there is too much drift. Then we'll also talk about how we can have decision oriented models so that risk managers and the executives can make the right decisions at right time. So let's get into it. We'll take example of the SEBI CSCRF or the compliance ecosystem, how it looks at it. So there is a board and executive level leadership where vision, culture and strategy comes into picture, and also a steering committee on technology which has to be established by the regulated entities. Let me specify that this particular framework or the regulations that has come from SEBI applies only to the regulated entities. Of course, there are different grades of regulated entities. At the top, there would be giants like NSE, BSE, and then some asset management companies that have a lot of uh, people's money that they are managing. Now, let's talk about the key components, right? So, the key components would be risk management, IT operations, security operations, some kind of technology committee or SCOT. Then there will be IT asset management, and then there would be compliance function. Now, to simply meet the compliance requirements of SEBI framework, you would need all these departments or functions talking the same language and operating in a harmonious manner, which ultimately leads to compliance. I'll be very candid. Compliance is not a goal that you are chasing. It's the culture that you want to change, which in itself becomes more resilient, more compliant, and also future proof. This tells you what SEBI wants and what are the functions in a regulated entity that has to come together to manifest the compliance. So let's get into it, right? So it is the resilience mandate. Why SEBI CSCRF is a boardroom issue, not a tool deployment. And in today's discussion, I'll take more of a critical angle on why there is so much drift between the vision that board has and the on ground reality. Sometimes it boils down to the fact that executive thinks that buying a tool would solve their problem. So let's get into it. So the idea is that we have to move from vendor selection to organizational transformation. So when we talk about compliance, it's not about purchasing a tool. You can buy Archer, you can buy ServiceNow, you can buy Metric Stream. Does that mean you will be compliant? I can tell you with 100% certainty, no, you will not be compliant. The goal is to have resilience as culture. So we can focus on embedding compliance into the corporate DNA itself. And I have seen that most regulated entities treat this as a software implementation challenge. However, achieving true resilience requires a fundamental alignment with vision, governance. Some of the entities that I have worked with treat it as a software implementation challenge. So we must move from asking which tool do we buy to how do we govern. And this is the beautiful convergence of risk, operations, and security that ultimately would give you a compliance posture. So, risk management, security operations, and IT operations talking together. Of course, on a foundation of a really good IT asset management or CMDB. And the challenge right now is that all these departments talk in silos. Talk about a tool, right? So, tool is a container, it's not the content. Now, what is a content? The content would be the policies, the authority documents, the processes that you use to run day to day operations. That's the real content. And the hard truth is that if you automate a broken process, You simply break things faster and in an automated manner. This is a common misconception across a lot of clients that I have worked with, that they talk about tools, they talk about the platforms, but they don't talk about the processes. It's about fixing the process and the culture that would ultimately lead you to compliance. I'll just spend maybe 20 seconds on this aspect. Now, there are so many functions. You see, there is IT asset management, there is security operations, there is risk management, there is compliance, and then there is SCOT. Now, how do all these functions talk together? So there has to be a executive level governance which takes care of the risk taxonomy, the way of talking, the language within the organization, and we have to have a unified language. There is one more gap that I see very often, which is people outsourcing responsibility or companies outsourcing a problem. It's a strategic error to outsource a problem. You can always outsource scaling, but solving a problem or reaching compliance cannot be outsourced. It has to be a fundamental responsibility of the organization to solve it themselves and then take help from experts to scale it. And if you treat compliance as a vendor problem, you will fail. So the new model is resilience first, right? So we have to have a top-down understanding of compliance. So the board and strategy level alignment. So where we define the vision, we define the risk appetite, we get the sponsorship, then we build the right blueprint for your company, and then we go to technology and operations. The third piece is where the tool comes into picture. So we must shift. We must define our North Star at a board level before configuring any workflow or any tool in our organization. There is one more point that I would like to highlight, which is compliance should not be treated as an add-on. Imagine I am IT head. I would focus a lot on IT. I will focus a lot on keeping my systems up and running and aiding other functions. But when it comes to compliance, there is so much resistance. I have to fill out a form or I have to deploy some kind of control. So that's the mindset we have to get rid of. So compliance should be treated as an immune system and not as an add-on. There has to be an assimilation between all the functions and the compliance function and not an addition. There has to be alignment. The goal is that the minds should meet and then the processes should be meticulously crafted to support growth while ensuring security. So this is the orchestration, right? So you start with alignment, then you get to the blueprint, then you get to assimilation, how everything comes together, and then you go to the tooling. So tooling in general is the last phase. So if you talk about SEBI, CSCRF, this is where everything comes together. So a strategic program that takes care of risk management, SCOT, compliance function, security operations, IT operations, and ITAM. Then you are in a position to declare to SEBI that you are compliant with confidence, with the right data, and a continuous compliance posture that can be maintained. So let's conclude this discussion. What's the definition of done? Definition of done is not buying a tool. It's not taking the boxes. It's not that we passed our last audit. It is to move from old ways to the new ways, which is having a secure vision, having a resilient operation, and where board is in control of the compliance. We solve the problem by owning the problem, not by buying a solution. Thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn to have more conversations or we can deep dive into a specific story.